This program is made possible in part by Nebraskans for Public Television. Consider this, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the Fireside Lounge in the Milo Bales Student Center, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hello and welcome back to UNO. We're going to talk about something that I've always felt, having lived here all my life, is one of the most important things in this community. But it's not what you would call in the world of news a buzz topic. We're talking about the Omaha Public Library system, and there is a lot going on in your public libraries. My guests today certainly know what is going on, and George Achola is Secretary of the Omaha Public Library Board of Trustees. Welcome to Consider This.
Thank you.
And Ed Trandle is Facilities Chairman, and there are things going on in the facilities, that's for sure. He is on the Board of Trustees as well. I think that one of the things that is grabbing most of the headlines we'll talk about first, but there are things that should be in the headlines. I mean, because I think the libraries are that important. And that is the issue of where the new South Omaha Library should be. Currently, I believe 23rd and M.
28th and Q.
28th and Q is
Where?
You mean the old
library?
Okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, South Omaha has been served by a branch for many, many, many years. And then there are other libraries that are south of Dodge and east of 42nd that have served the community as well. But there is going to be a new library. Mm-hmm. That's a certainty, correct?
Absolutely.
Yes.
And the question is should it be a freestanding library in the heart of what we consider the South Omaha Commercial District, around 24th and L to Q? Is that fair?
Yep.
Somewhere in there?
Somewhere in that general.
Or should it be a combined project with Metropolitan Community College and be on, I believe it's proposed, the eastern edge of the South Omaha campus of Metro,
28th and Q.
That's right.
And, you know, you're not quite of like minds on that, but where do we stand on that, George?
Well, you know, this is an issue that Ed and I disagree, and probably the majority of the board disagree on. Where I stand on the issue is that I'm not against the project with the joint facility with Metro, but I just don't think that we've done the proper analysis and homework that we need to do when we're talking about a huge amount of money that we're going to invest into this project.
And roughly how much are we talking about?
The latest figures that I've been told are anywhere between $7 to $9 million. So somewhere in that general range, and it's coming out of the city's commercial improvement project fund. You know, my only complaint with the project has been is we were only given one site initially. We were told that that's what the site was going to be before we as a board had the opportunity to determine by what criteria we were going to evaluate the project, where we were going to put the library, whether we were going to evaluate any of the sites. In the end, the location that is currently proposed may be the best site, but I've always been an analysis or a process person, and when I'm making an important decision, I want the benefit of some information before me so I know that I'm making the right decision. You know, we've not had any financial data presented to us as far as what is going to be Metro's role or Metro's contribution in this project. And I look at it from a business perspective. You know, I look at it as a merger. And you talk to anybody who's doing mergers and acquisitions, one of the first things you do is your due diligence to see how taking somebody else on into your company or vice versa is going to affect your bottom line, your operating side, your personnel side. And also I think it has to be a mutual thing, and I don't think in this case it was a mutual thing as far as this site is located. And certain people may disagree with me, but I think this was generally a deal that was made by the two executive leaders of the two groups. In our case, the City of Omaha's executive, which at the time was the Mayor Hal Daub, and in Metro's case, which at the time was John Gill. And I think they kind of pretty much cemented the deal and kind of told us, well, this is where we're going to put it and go forward. And then we as a board had to scramble, so to speak, to attempt to look at the site. So that has been my biggest problem with the project.
Well, I do remember when it was on the front page of the World Herald, and I was, you know, I hadn't, you know, usually you hear a little niggling of information about something's in the works, and I'm not privy to any of the great secrets of Omaha, but I was a little surprised that there wasn't a little more public discussion of that before it was kind of announced. Now, it's not a done deal yet, but Ed, why do you think it might be, at least in theory, a good idea to to put the two together?
Well, first of all, the library board has approved that site and has also reaffirmed it. George knows that he is not, and he says he thinks it might still be a good site, but he hasn't really voted against it himself. He was concerned about more research, and so we hired the man that has done quite a lot of research with quite a few libraries in the country. His name is George Lawson, and we hired him actually at George's urging to do this. And he did.
This George?
Yes.
Yes.
Hiring that George?
George Achola was behind hiring George Lawson. And George Lawson did a study. He's done other work for the Omaha library system. He's a registered librarian and good researcher, and he took a look at the whole situation. He spent a lot of time on it, and this board never did go along with what the mayor recommended or what the president of the Metro Community College recommended until we had a study done and until our library staff went down there and took a look at it. I think the mayor at that time was kind of abrupt in trying to push this site, but the long and the short of it is that we looked at it, we found that it is a good site. It's on a very public street, and we have tremendous opportunities to provide a regional library, a big, really big library for South Omaha for no more than it would cost us to put a separate library somewhere else.
Okay, so bottom line now, has the Library Board of Trustees been satisfied in one or both of your minds that this is that these issues that you spoke of, who's going to do what's who bringing to the table, that these have all been answered?
In my mind, no. And that's still part of the problem that I have. Yeah, like I indicated earlier, I look at it as a merger, okay? And to date, the questions that you're asking, those have not been answered to my satisfaction. In regards to George Lawson, I quarrel with the quality of the work that he did, even though it was at my urging, because I think some of the analysis, if you were to have somebody truly look at it, I think some of the logic and analysis behind it was very faulty. We were asked him to look at the one site only. He was not asked to do a comparative analysis of any of the sites. At the time that we did this, we did not take into account any of the cultural issues that may be involved in moving that specific branch, because then there are some which have been raised recently.
Well, and we'll mention that.
So those are issues, and there's multiple issues in my opinion that were not addressed because we were so rushed to get this thing done, because basically we were given a 2.5 month time frame to make a decision on this location and then this partnership. And so, I'm not going to quarrel with Ed. Yeah, we did hire Lawson, and he did do analysis on that site, and as I indicated, I didn't vote against it because at the time I did not have enough information to make a reasoned decision, and that includes not voting against it, or voting for it.
Okay, the cultural issue. You have to be living in a cave in Omaha not to know that the what we used to call South O, that main drag, that 24th and LQ down 24th, because I went to high school in South Omaha, and that has changed from my young generation to the current young generation. It is predominantly Hispanic. You go down there, wonder what was almost a dead area after the transition and the big Phillips department store was gone, and then Packers National Bank finally moved out, and now it's a whole different world in there, and wonderful little Hispanic shops, and what a wonderful flavor, and it's burgeoning, huge Spanish enclave down there. And so the issue has been for a number of years, actually, George, is how much do we continue to invest in that corridor there to keep that corridor as the main kind of thrust, the Dodge Street of South Omaha? And do we do it at the expense of not properly developing other areas, perhaps around 36th and Q and that whole, because that's all, there's a major Hispanic influence, and it will probably move even west. So just culturally, I can understand the concern of people like Ben Salazar, who is the leader of the new Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and publishes a newspaper. But, okay, pick it up from there.
Well, let's talk about the South Omaha Library staff. One of the staff members down there is Linda Garcia, and she's a very strong advocate of the new site. She sees no problem with it. She thinks it's going to provide more opportunities for Hispanic people. The whole library staff down there thinks the new site is a great opportunity for everybody that lives in that area. So, that's something that we should all keep in mind. Another thing is that they did a survey of people coming in using the library, and they asked them whether they would have a problem moving, and the opinion was split, but most of them didn't see a big problem with moving over there.
Is that the study that was just released?
Yes.
In the paper? Yeah, that's a 2-year-old study too.
Well, I mean, it was republished. I mean, right. And the other thing is that the library did a study of where everybody comes from, and the location that we've chosen is very centralized to the people that use the library. That's what our own library study shows.
Okay, so you have a library that you're going to build. So far, Metro Community College Board has approved of the concept or the site or everything. Mm-hmm. You have, in essence, but when it gets right down to it, whether you follow through on this or something else comes up, which you always can, what do you need to do now to make it successful? I mean, that everybody doesn't feel they were hoodwinked, or that they weren't listened to, or that it's for everybody, it's for children, it's for all of the southeast part of the town.
Well, to be honest, I don't think I'll ever feel that I wasn't hoodwinked, because I honestly feel I was. And I don't think whether, the thing may
it's hard to believe anyone could hoodwink George Achola.
I guess hoodwink was probably not the right term. I think I was forced to put in a position where I had to make a very important decision with that good information. And I will never get over that. Now, like I've indicated earlier, this thing may go forward at that location and be a great success, but the discussion that we're having here about the culture issues, the finance issues, the organizational issues, those are discussions that we should have had long before we delved into this project and long before we approved this site. And that has always been a problem to me. It's almost like we engaged in a backward analysis. I support the South Omaha Library. I support the partnership with Metro if the numbers work out. If the numbers work out for us. The problem I've got with building a huge regional library is one of the questions I've always asked from the very get-go is, can somebody tell me how this is going to affect our bottom line? We're a library with basically a $9 million a year budget, and that's being cut at this point because of the budgetary constraints. When you're talking about building a library the size of a regional library, you're talking about building the size of an Abrahams or a Swanson or maybe even a Millard. It takes money to fill that branch, it takes money to operate that branch. And I think in order to run a library the size that we're talking about building, we're going to have to take money from somewhere else unless the administration and the city council is willing to give us more money to properly operate that library. So that's, to me, has always been the issue, is where are we going to get the money to operate a library of this size? Are we going to take from Cather? Are we going to take from Benson? Are we going to take from somewhere else? And you talked about something that's very important to me, and one of the things that should have been discussed is you talked about Benson. That is a library, to me, that is a beautiful library. It's anchor.
It was expanded recently. It is a beautiful facility.
Yeah. It's an anchor to a neighborhood. And when you look at all the neighborhood branches, when they were originally built, and you look at the locations, that was kind of their primary purpose. When we ended at West Omaha, the geographics had changed a little bit. We're a little bit more of a mobile culture out there. Things had changed a little bit.
I went to story time at Willa Cather Branch Library as a kid, and it was one of the few places I could walk that was any distance from my house.
And so that's another issue that has never been discussed, is how is that going to change the nature of library service in those locations? Because when those places were originally designed and you look at where they're currently located, they serve as a meshing point with the rest of the community.
Don't you think that's the Hispanic community? One of their concerns is the fact that they're trying to keep that area alive, and that it's a very busy area. Children are comfortable in that area. you know, do you think that's part
That's
of
a
it?
concern of some people. You know, no matter where we put the library, if we didn't put it where we voted to put it, there would be people say, I don't want it here, I don't want it there, I don't want it somewhere else. The library is in a central location. There is tons of residential around that area. There's a public housing project. There's
Well, the YMCA, the LaFern Williams Center.
Yes, there's a number of things like that. Plus, nobody here has talked yet about the redevelopment of the stockyards there. There's going to be new development in that area, so it's not like it's
Sitting there on an
isolated.
island.
Right, and another thing is
Matt is going to have hub
is-
service there.
Matt wants to do a hub service there so that the transportation, public transportation there is going to be very good. We want libraries today, and I don't think George disagrees with this. We want libraries in very visible places, you know, whether it would be on 24th or on Q or wherever. We don't want to put them back in a park somewhere. We want them out there in the open. One of
Well-
the mistakes that was made with the Millard location is that it's off of 132nd and
How do you get there
West
unless
Center.
you're
And you
you're
don't,
mobile yourself?
You know, the lady that runs a coffee house that I was at this morning was telling me how hard it was for her to find the Millard Public
It
Library.
is a little hard. It is a little hard.
Once
Let me-
you find it, of course, it's a great place.
Well, let's move on a little, but since you're both on the Board of Trustees, I will trust these trustees
Okay.
to push to get those answers that you're talking about.
And I will, as long as I'm there, with my
Oh.
last dying breath on that board.
All right, okay. But let's move on. You talk about where libraries are, and I was reading the last library minutes, and they're talking about maybe even, you know, having a branch ultimately way out west, 168th, maybe in a shopping mall. I mean, libraries are changing. They have to change. I don't go to the library as much. I've got the internet. So what is exciting to you about the changes in the modern library, and what void do they fill that is a little different than the, like I said, the neighborhood story time a million years ago? Although it still does fill some of that.
Yeah.
I think it'll always feel that, but I think as society is changing, we're becoming more and more of a technological society, and I think libraries to a certain extent have to keep pace with that. We're also to a certain extent facing competition from the Borders, the Barnes & Nobles, you know, even though we're not in the same business because we technically try to provide a free service, there's no doubt that a lot of our customers are generally spending a lot of time in those types of places, so we have to attempt to compete with that. And I think that's why this new proposed project at 160th and Dodge that I think you talked about in the minutes makes sense, because where they're talking about doing it is building it just, you know, in my opinion, just like the old style branch neighborhood libraries.
Go
Putting
where the
it-
people go.
Go where the people go, put it in a location.
And Willa Cather was right by the Center Shopping Center, which
Exactly.
was the first
Exactly.
mall in this town. People can't
Exactly.
remember.
And I think, you know,
that.
that's where that project is going. But I think we've got to keep pace technologically and keep pace with the way that, you know, at least keep pace with the way that the rest our competition, so to speak, is
That's
doing
a
business.
question. Is a library necessary if it's competing with the commercial enterprise? Now, here we are on public television, and I seem to say, well, she's begging the wrong question. But what I'm saying is, you don't necessarily, in some ways you don't compete, you need to complement or fill a void that isn't being filled. I mean, I can go to Borders and I have a great time, and I know people that appear there and play music, but I can't pick up a book and take it home for nothing.
I love bookstores, but the library is different from a bookstore in the sense that everything is free. If you are poor, if you are middle class or rich, doesn't make any difference. You're all welcome at the library. It's free to you. The resources there are enormously greater than they would ever be in any bookstore, that even the biggest Barnes & Noble store in the world doesn't have the kind of resources that you have at the public library. In addition, they don't have trained librarians there to help you do the research that you want. They don't have the capability for the children's reading programs. 15,000 children last summer went in the summer reading program, and those programs go on all year long. So they don't have that. They don't have the let's say, books that were published 10, 20, 30 years ago. You think you're going to buy a lot of those in a bookstore?
No, you
Forget it.
can only get those.
And another thing now that we've got, that I mentioned to you before the broadcast, is that we now have, it just getting started is the library's research service is now available to you at home on your computer.
Yeah, and these are things you can't get through an internet search. These are databases, and all you have to do is have a library card and a PIN number. And speaking of library cards, we're going to show the viewers that haven't been acclimated the brand new Gee Whiz Wow library card. That's like a baker's card, and it's computerized, and you have the big version and you have the keychain version, which Ed pointed out to me, if you lose your keys, the library will get them back to you.
Absolutely, and I think that to a certain extent I give kudos to our staff, because that's part of that, being more of a consumer-friendly organization, because I think we have to keep pace and become more of a consumer-friendly organization, and these new library cards are a step in that direction, and I think the public will like them, because it's like you said, it's a lot like a baker's card. So.
Yeah, and so it has a lot of benefits. And then you can go online now with one of those and a PIN number and get access to things that you couldn't do. But you'll still have a librarian you can call.
Absolutely.
That's the beauty of it.
That's your backup, and you always want to go to the library once in a while and visit with the library people about questions that you can't seem to quite answer, because even with the best resource services, if you haven't spent your life learning how to do research, that's where your public librarian, free of charge, is there to help you out. And those are the things that make it different from a bookstore.
We'll talk about the computerization in a second, because that's pretty phenomenal, at least in the libraries that I've been in, what the computer access. But people might say, everybody's got a computer. What's the whoop about putting computers in the library?
Well, as a child, not exactly if I would call millions who grew up loving books, I would correlate it to, as we indicated, we're becoming more of a technological society. Some people can't afford to have a computer at home, even though the prices are dropping drastically. It's still a chore for a lot of people to have it at home. And I think to a certain extent, hopefully, we can fill that void. And just having a computer at home sometimes is not enough. You still got to pay your internet access fees. You've got to pay a whole host of those costs, and some of those sites that you may want to get to may not be exactly free. There's always going to be some type of hidden costs.
There's always more costs, isn't there? I mean,
oh, yeah.
When you got a computer, I mean, I currently have a virus on mine, so that's going to cost me.
And thanks for the virus warning, by the way. But the thing is, and I do know that, and knowing how to use it, whether you're a young child whose family can't afford it, or you're an older person who's afraid of computers, you can go to the library, get your hands on, get a Hotmail, Yahoo account, you can get internet, you can get basic instruction on basically just how to do it.
Right. We've started that about 2 years ago, and part of the reason is so that people know how to use the computerized book system for finding books and other things at the library. And a part of it also is just to make those that can't afford to learn elsewhere, to teach them so they can go home and use them, or they can use the library's computers. We've got 450 computers now in our library, and 5 years ago we had probably, 30 or 40?
Which were basically the terminals to find out what books were in the library,
Yeah,
if I recall. The thing that amazes me is that even if everyone had a computer in their home, George and Ed, to think you never needed to go to a library. I mean, maybe, call me old-fashioned, call me wacky, call me wild, but there is something, if a young child does not get that experience or have that near and up-to-date, and that's a sad thing.
It would be a shame.
At home, I mean, if you're at home, the children's librarian is not there to read the books to you. Your mother's there, or your father, but you have an additional
I'll face it,
element.
I don't always have time to read the books.
Sure. And you go to the library, and there's all these beautiful, exciting books that kids can walk around and pick them out, and they meet people that are really great readers, and it's just the culture thing is very wonderful at a library.
And you know what I've noticed over the years, and it doesn't make any difference what race, what socioeconomic, I have noticed in every library that I've been to, and I like to go to the different libraries, that mothers take their children, sometimes fathers, and the mothers get to browse. They they go into their own world, knowing that the kids, because they don't have time to just sit and do that and read a book or look sometimes. And it's one of the most wonderful, I see that scene repeated over and over again. To me, it is one of the most wonderful things to watch.
That freedom that the system provides them by having the children being handled by the librarian. Yeah.
We are in a budget crunch. We've lost library hours. We don't have the libraries open as much. We have a few more minutes. And then I read in the paper this past week that one city councilman says perhaps we have to put off the library bond issue for the improvement of the facilities. These are kind of basic improvements, wiring, computer compatibility, just making them look like they're not out of that 50s kind of funk and the weird lights. Does this concern you that this isn't going to get done?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
Washington Library, North Omaha, I mean, you can get a South Omaha library, but what's going to happen in North Omaha?
Well, it absolutely concerns me. Libraries are important, and the problem we have is, even though they're very important, I mean, Thomas Jefferson, probably one of the most important men that ever lived, established libraries because he understood how important that they were. And that concerns me because as we've evolved as a society, we've become more of a political animal. And we as library, we don't have a political constituency as a union, as a police union or a fire union. People, it's not like roads where you see a bump, but they're important.
You're going to pick up the phone and you're going to call your city councilman.
But they're important because in a democratic society like ours, the flow of information is extremely important. And I think libraries give us access to that. That's why these budget constraints always worry me when the library is the first thing that gets cut. We're building a new arena. I think libraries are just as important as the new arena, if not more important, because our children, the future of our children to a certain extent, they evolved through libraries. And Ed and myself can tell you, as being products of that system, how integral that was to a part of our development. And I understand an arena is important because they're going to use it as a big economic tool to draw people in and it's popular politically. But I think we need to put as much focus and as much energy in our library system as we do in those other areas. So it's just a question of priorities.
And we are losing our ranking compared to other libraries
Yes, we
and cities
are.
our size.
Compared to other libraries in comparable cities in the Midwest, Omaha ranks right on the bottom now in per capita spending. It's just sad that we can't do any better than that. And this city that has been growing, we have cut our hours by 6,656 hours. That many fewer hours the libraries will be open in 2002 as a result of the budget cuts.
Well, we're running out of our hours, and I just
Yeah.
want to mention there's a lot going on in Women's History Month in March and Black History March at your local library. Interesting speakers. Get online. They've got a good website. Don't take your library for granted. Thanks for joining us this week. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you,
Thank
Carol.
you.
On Consider This.
This program is made possible in part by Nebraskans for Public Television.